sessions to go. The 11th, of course, will be on the 1st of Feb, Saturday. And what is India Inc. expecting from the budget? Ameera Shah is joining us on that conversation, promoter and executive chairperson of Metropolis Healthcare. Ameera, very good morning and great to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with the overview of what you think should be in the finance minister's list this time round as far as your sector is concerned.
So just broadly speaking on the whole economy, I think the focus has to be obviously on boosting the economy and really moving into expansion and innovation. We need to obviously stabilize our fiscal deficit a bit. We need to focus on tax reform and obviously really spur investment growth, just broadly from the financial part of the economy. On our industry, it's very interesting. While the government has put a peg of 2.5% contribution of GDP from a healthcare perspective, we are very slowly inching up to that in every budget. And I really hope that we're able to make a bigger leap in this particular budget of FY 25-26. Healthcare certainly needs more focus in our economy. And we certainly hope that there's more provision for investment there. There are a few framework decisions which are also critical. One of the key focus of the government is to really make healthcare more accessible and more affordable. Accessibility will, of course, happen through more expansion in private sector and public, for which we need to create incentive schemes to be able to really go to smaller towns where affordability may be a challenge. And second of all, we really need to focus on how do we reduce some of the costs, right? An example is there are a huge amount of import duties on all kinds of kits, reagents, and hospital usage devices when coming into India. If we want to make it more affordable, I think it would make sense for the government to try to rationalize some of these things so we're able to make healthcare more affordable for the Indian population. Second of all, in the diagnostic sector, for example, formalizing the sector, by making some accreditation mandatory. Which is not there currently. It's a free-for-all where anybody can operate. We would also like them to sort of put in a 0% GST. Currently, our industry has all the input costs for GST and no way to offset them. So it's actually burdening, again, the health consumer once more. We've also talked about the government really focusing on preventive healthcare going forward. To do that, currently you have about 5,000 of a tax exemption at the end of the year, which can be moved against your income. We do urge that this should be increased to 10,000 rupees because 5,000 for a whole family becomes quite challenging. And lastly, I think boosting R&D in healthcare is absolutely tremendously important. We have not really seen schemes yet that allow for R&D expenditures to be offset, like in the pharma industry, or any sort of incentives for boosting R&D, either in medtech or in diagnostics. And we would certainly hope that there would be a change there.
Ameera, you made a few points, including formalizing the sector, GST, as well as boosting R&D in healthcare specifically. I'm going to take the last point first with you. And from the government's perspective, what are the measures that they can take within the union budget and outside in order to encourage and push that research and development in the healthcare space?
So, for example, in the pharma world, there have been ways to, sort of invest in R&D and have those costs offset, or to have them sort of, given a different treatment from a P&L basis over a 10-year period, right? So if something like that could be organized for the rest of the healthcare sector, I think that would be quite interesting. For example, in diagnostics, we land up bringing a lot of new tests and innovating new tests in our industry. And frankly, for almost 5, 7, 8 years, these tests don't land up making any money because you need to invest in them, create the education, start all of those tests, and all of that costs money. When you're not being able to offset those R&D expenses at all, that doesn't necessarily become an incentive to keep starting it. Companies like ours at Metropolis, we keep doing it because we want to stay innovative, but having some commercial benefit of it would be helpful for this to become a larger, more, sort of broader trend across the industry. And of course, the GST point is very much in the government's control, right? Like we keep telling the government that, we have all the input costs, please help us offset it. It will really help the patient. And I think that's something if they would pay attention to from a healthcare perspective, I think would really serve the industry in a very broad way and really help in formalizing it. Because, in the unorganized sector, there obviously continues to be, without proper GST tracking, there continues to be a lot of mismanagement fiscally, and I think formalizing it under the GST would actually help a lot in formalizing the sector.
Ameera, I also want to follow up on, accreditation and formalizing the sector. You did make a point about that. What we wanted to understand a little better is what is NABL accreditation and how can that help in, in exactly that, formalizing the sector?
So you have about, and we all estimate this, we don't know for sure, but we think there are about 300,000 labs in the country. And of this, 99.9% are not accredited. There are only approximately, I think, 3,000 labs in the country which are accredited, and that is voluntary accreditation by NABL, right? And at the end of the day, as a patient, when you're going into a lab, your expectation is that the government is monitoring what's happening behind the scenes, and therefore I can trust this report. But that's not the current situation. And by putting some accreditation, a minimum standard, and NABL has come out now with even more minimum standards for smaller labs. We must make this mandatory, because otherwise we are breaking a patient's trust who actually believe that there is some governance happening behind the scenes, but today there is no such governance happening behind the scenes. Considering how important the health report is for a patient to make a decision for their treatment, putting that mandatory accreditation or minimum standard will really enable a consolidation of the sector, because those who are just not doing the test or not doing it properly, will either have to shape up or move out. And that will truly help in formalizing the sector from a trust perspective as well.
Just one last take, Ameera, and in terms of, it's I think out of budget kind of question, but in terms of the kind of demand that you're seeing, I'm just wondering if you're seeing any flagging in demand at any of your centers, since right now the conversation is about discretionary spends getting tightened, and of course basic tests, yes, but are you seeing any kind of squeeze on maybe some of the most detailed tests and diagnostics?
So actually the discretionary test, which is more around wellness, preventive healthcare, etc., we are not seeing any tightness there. Actually, we are continuing to see that grow well. What we did see was October, November, December is obviously always the worst quarter in the year for the industry, because it is a quarter full of festivals where people travel a lot, they're focused on family time, and really people are not thinking about health. So usually Q3 is always the worst quarter. There's nothing new about it. This year as well, it is the lowest quarter, like it is every year, and that was actually expected, in the entire year. So nothing new that we are really seeing. Also it depends company to company, right? I mean, for Metropolis, we largely deal with a lot of patients who are unwell and sick, and therefore for them it's not discretionary at all. And it is a must-do, and we deal with very critical illnesses. But for companies or firms which are dealing completely in preventive care, they might see a little bit more of a compression in growth.
All right, thank you so much for that, Ameera. Ameera Shah there on expectations from the budget, and this time round I think expectations are higher, with all eyes on what the finance minister announces to actually boost the Indian economy.